Brain imaging in children, if we have a better understanding of the brain in fetal development and for babies and toddlers, what will that allow us to understand? What does it prevent? What does it treat?
Well, everything begins in utero, pretty much. So your life is an arc from infancy or when you're conceived through to adulthood. So the more we can understand the early development, the more we can start to understand how we make sure children are on the right trajectory. So the goal is to characterize brain development very early on, so we tell at the very earliest point when to start to deviate from a normal trajectory so we can get things back on track early as possible. And ideally, we want in future to be able to prevent diseases from happening, not just try to deal with them and try to correct them later on when the damage is partly done.
So how early can we do it today and detect that there's something wrong? How early, realistically, do you think we can get it to?
Yeah, we start looking at fetuses at about 11, 15 weeks, something around there at the earliest.
Right.
Closer to around 18 weeks. We start to characterize brain development, 18, 19 weeks or so. So it begins quite early when we start to see and look at early brain development.
Well, you and your team did a study a few years ago that gave you results to argue for earlier MRI during pregnancy.
Yeah.
Is that study enough to actually change the standard of care?
Well, we do use it early here at Boston Children's, so when there's an indication, we do it as early as we can to better characterize the entire fetus, because it's not just the brain, it's the body it's attached to, too. So we want to understand not just the brain development, but how that brain is developing in the context of the other organ systems. So we can do that.
Because it doesn't necessarily run hand in hand. Like, it can be very different, right? Or like in terms of what's going on with brain development versus the rest of the system, they can disconnect or no?
They're intimately connected throughout life.
So if there's one,
So that's why we want to understand. So say, for example, we deal with a lot of congenital heart disease here. That has effects on brain development. We deal with congenital diaphragmatic hernias. That has effects on brain development. So everything that's happening in the fetus, whether it's brain or not, has the potential to have subtle effects on brain development.
Why do kids do need specialized tools for brain imaging? Tell us about that. Why?
Yeah. That's the whole reason that I came to Boston Children's is industry's not interested in fetuses, infants, and young children. So it's really hard to get devices that are built specifically for these age range. So that's why I brought a team of technical people. So they're engineers, physicists, computer scientists, data scientists that help to either develop the devices or come up with better ways to analyze the data that we get with an eye on trying to understand pediatric disorders. So, for example, we want to monitor, and we're developing optical devices for the NICU to monitor cerebral blood flow. But the heart rate of a neonate is 150. So we have to sample at a much higher rate than you would in an adult to get the same information. So we have to build specifically devices to the physiology. And then if you think of the head of a premature baby, it's very, very small.
Right.
So I can't take a probe that we use in adults and just put it on a preterm. So we have to develop the devices to fit the size of the infants.
I want to just go, and I feel like we touched on this earlier. I mean, we are Bloomberg Businessweek. We are Bloomberg and very entrenched in financial markets. And I feel like the more I've been doing this, money just follows everything. Money is why people do things or don't do things. Is that really it? Is it just the market? I hate to even make it that way. The market size. And so you don't have medical equipment companies building the things because they just don't think the market size is big enough?
That is a big problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're trying to get into more of a business perspective. Like if we do a small startup that starts to answer those questions, then a bigger company might buy it. But if we stay in the research realm, then it's sometimes really hard to go that last mile and get something into clinical practice.
So how do you do that? How do you cross that? So what do you do?
Yeah, this is what we're strategizing on right now, is trying to figure out how we do those small startups, get industry interested. Because and a lot of things we're doing like right now, actually, one of the projects we're working on is, AI strategies, right? And if we can get enough data on infants or fetuses and so on, we can start to build models that predict not just group outcomes, but we want to get to individual outcomes because that's what parents care about, right? So if we can get those models together, so that's what we're working on now, is trying to create these AI models that are specialized for pediatrics and hoping to do startups around that particular concept.
I have to ask one more question. Are venture capitalists interested?
I don't know, because we haven't really talked to any that I've heard about, but I think they always want something that's almost ready, so we're hoping to
a bit further along.
Yeah, a little bit further along.
Okay. Interesting.
Can what we learn and what you understand through imaging about the brain's development be applied to how adult brains are treated?
everything in adult life has its genesis in infants, right? So we learn a lot.
We were all there once.
Yeah, exactly. And some of the ways the adult brain responds is more prominent in a pediatric brain. So in some disorders, they go to pediatric models to see a physiology that's more prominent in neonates or infants, but also occurs in adults.
You know, there was in doing the research in the prep for our interview with you, there is a picture of a physician or a therapist doing some what's I think is called therapeutic hypothermia to a brand new baby's head.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that oxygen deprivation around birth is one of the leading reasons that you actually see babies come into the NICU.
Yes, that is one of the main reasons. Yes.
And the therapy for this is as simple as
you cool them down, or at least
down
keep
their
them
brains?
normal. Yeah, or at least keep them
that?
normal thermic. Because when they have injuries, the response to sort of the whole physiological response to an injury is to have a fever, and that is detrimental. So we want to keep them cool so that they don't set off these cascades of brain injury. And that's partly why we built this one device, because we want to be able to monitor through the NICU stay and optimize management. But it's interesting, we don't even know what the right blood pressure for a newborn is. So this is why we wanted to have a probe that could measure cerebral blood flow to the brain, because there is no way to monitor whether there's enough brain or oxygen getting to the brain with the tools that we have right now.
I feel like we never even talk about blood pressure when it comes to like infants, right?
Yeah.
We just don't. But you need to know.
Yeah.
You did your residency and fellowship in the 1990s. Yes. Curious how imaging has changed since then.
Oh,
and
my
then
gosh.
Where do you think, how will it improve in the next, 10 years?
Yeah,
I don't know what's a smart benchmark.
Yeah. No, when I was in training, MR was just starting, and it was very slow. So where we've come now is the acceleration acquisition is just incredible. What used to take us an hour to do, we can do in 10 minutes now. So the speed of acquisition is huge. We're also developing a lot of post-analysis that we can do after the images are acquired to give us more quantitative metrics, because the whole thing in medicine, to get past the qualitative read of a radiologist, which is helpful, but we want to put more numbers on it so we can have a more dynamic range on how we describe each child, and this therefore we can get into better precision medicine and outcome prediction. So we're getting more to that quantitative aspect of imaging now, and not just brain but all body parts, of course, and down to fetal age.
Is it for kids too, every case is very personal and individual, or are there trends and things that you can help in so that one case can help another? Like, is there a body of knowledge that gets built off of this?
Yes, there's body of knowledge that gets built off of this, but this is where we come back to AI. I only can remember so much, even though I've been in practice for a long time, things fall out.
Join
right?
the crowd.
So this is where I'm really excited about AI, because I can, mine our databases to find where's an individual child just like that one I'm treating now.
Right.
What did they respond to? What worked for them? And how are these two similar? So I can mine the databases to start to come up with individual outcome prediction, which is what we're doing right now with databases we've got from some of the major trials for hypothermia. And so we can use this large database to try to take individual outcomes. You can say, well, I have a newborn with this pH that had these, and I'm a mother of this age, and put in features, and they could give you from that database an outcome prediction. So working on that, and also working on making data more available to parents, because I think a lot of parents are very frustrated with trying to read the literature, even if you're using ChatGPT or
It's really hard.
It's really hard. And then you get group statistics. And then where does my kid fit in between the 25 to 75%, good outcome or something like that?
Yeah.
To get chatbots that can work with some of our databases, so anybody can talk to, a physician, so to speak, to give the answers that they want.
That's pretty remarkable, because I just think about the tone of these chatbots, and if there's a way that they can be, we talked earlier this week about what a challenge it can be for people to actually interact with them in a quote unquote normal way. But is there a way for them to actually be empathetic and work with patients, work with parents, work with families?
And forgive us, we've got about 40 seconds.
Yeah. No, we're working on that, but I can't tell you all the secrets because we're going to start.
You can. You can. Wait, no, you can go longer than that. Can I ask you something? When you guys use AI in chatbots, do you have hallucinations? Like, do the AI hallucinations? How do you, especially when you're dealing with medical information?
There's a lot of safeguards we put around that.
So
we have, again, this is sort of more the secret sauce that I can't talk about yet, but there are ways to constrain chatbots to give you reasonable answers that are statistically sound.